When I thought about doing book recommendations, I thought that I'd try to make it a little different. Because the way I read, I feel like is a little different. I really like a good fictional narrative. I love good writing. But I'm also really into nonfiction books, and I really get into primary sources, particularly when it comes to like Roman history. So here I thought I would recommend in that order. Each one will be a fictional recommendation, and then a nonfiction recommendation, and then a primary source recommendation, and then we'll start from the beginning again. The first book is The Stand by Stephen King. I've read about 4 or 5 Stephen King books in my life, but this was my favorite. It's probably the second or third one I read, but it was definitely my favorite. It's an epic post-apocalyptic novel. There's a huge plague that wipes out most of humanity, and there's a few survivors scattered around. And each of those survivors is mysteriously drawn to one of 2 places. There's either this wonderful saint-like woman named Mother Abigail, or they're drawn to this sinister guy named Randall Flagg, who is also in the book called The Walking Dude. Most importantly, he's like a malevolent personification of maybe a demon. But once the groups assemble, the story goes on to pit good against evil through very memorable and interesting characters. And he uses a lot of space to develop them. My only complaint about this book is this little picky detail about the finale. But other than that, the whole thing was really good. It's still my favorite Stephen King book. It's the first really long book I ever read as a teenager. It's over 1,100 pages. I remember I took the whole summer to read it when I was a teenager. But I love it, and I recommend it. Stand by Stephen King. The first nonfiction book I'm going to do is called Team of Rivals. It's a biography of Abraham Lincoln, which itself is super interesting. But it also examines how he assembled a cabinet of his former political opponents, some of which like really hated him at first. It's written by Doris Kearns Goodwin. It says it won the Pulitzer Prize, so that stands for something. It shows how Lincoln used his intellect, but also his humility to manage strong personalities and get the best out of them, even when they conflicted about their ideology. The book highlights political skill, especially during the Civil War. It was incredible to learn about how he had to deal with the various Union generals during the war before he found Grant. But every bit of this book is good and eye-opening, and I'll tell you what, it blows right by when you read it. All right, the first primary source book I'm going to go with is Livy, The War with Hannibal. This is a section of Livy's histories, and in this section he recounts Rome's struggle against Hannibal during the Second Punic War. It includes the famous crossing of the Alps, the brutal Battle of Cannae, in which Hannibal absolutely destroys the Roman legions, to the point where the war probably would have been over if the Romans were made of different stuff. Rome eventually does win through repeated perseverance in the face of repeated disaster. And behind their own emerging prodigy general, Scipio Africanus, this book illustrates how Rome ultimately emerged as the dominant power in the Mediterranean, but not without much struggle. And Hannibal's awesome. This is a really good book. All right, my second fiction novel is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. The story follows a poor student who convinces himself that he is superior to other men through sort of a twisted Nietzschean philosophy. So he murders and robs a pawnbroker and attempts to justify his actions intellectually. He becomes consumed, however, by guilt and paranoia. And he tries to find redemption by using what he stole to show generosity and compassion. That's not enough. It sets him on his path. But it isn't enough until he's actually caught and he serves his punishment. And that's when he finds redemption. Dostoevsky is my favorite author of all time. And this will not be the only book on this video. Crime and Punishment. Okay, for my second nonfiction, I'm going to go with Plato's Republic. So much of what we think of Western philosophy originated with Plato. In this book, through dialogues led by Socrates, he discusses education, virtue, political leadership. He poses fascinating thought experiments that still hold up today, like the allegory of the cave and the ring of Gyges. He introduces concepts of the philosopher king and that's what he thinks is the ideal ruler, this philosopher king. But simply put, this book has profoundly influenced political theory, ethics, and Western thought. And if your school hasn't made you yet, you should read it. All right, for my second primary source book, I'm going to go with The Campaigns of Alexander by Arrian. Of the primary sources about Alexander the Great, I think Arrian is probably my favorite. He goes into detail and he breaks down battle strategies of the individual campaigns. But more specifically, this landmark version is my favorite because it gives you maps so that when you're reading about the different campaigns and the different locations, you can see what he's talking about. There's other illustrations in here too, but the maps are super helpful, especially when reading Arrian. This book details Alexander's strategies, battles, and leadership style. It's considered one of the most reliable ancient sources on Alexander's life, and you should read it. Okay, for my third fiction book, I'm going to go with The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I didn't start with this one. I heard a lot about Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, and I read that, and I absolutely fell in love with the richly descriptive prose. But to be completely honest, that one is a little much for me. There's a lot in that book. But in this book, you get the same richly descriptive scene building, but in a post-apocalyptic novel about a father and his son traveling through a devastated America. They struggle to survive while maintaining their humanity in a world filled with danger. Almost anyone they run into is dangerous. And because the world doesn't seem to be getting any better, the motivation to continue living is at an unimaginable extreme, but they have to continue on to carry the fire, as they say. Okay, my next nonfiction is called Grant by Ron Chernow. Boy, this biography was good, man. I actually got sad. It's a long book, but I actually got sad getting to the end. It's so good. There's so much in it about this simple, conflicted man who was so genuine and moral in some important ways, but also such an anti-hero in other ways. It's written by Ron Chernow. It challenged many long-standing misconceptions about Grant's abilities and character. My favorite scene, definitely, he's asked to speak at a dinner, and he rises and everyone turns to look at this great Civil War hero. And he says something to the effect of, I'm not much of a speaker, so I won't. Thank you for having me. And then he sits back down. Simple, haunting, wonderful, very, very well detailed by Ron Chernow. This is a good book and you should read it. All right, my next primary source book is called The 12 Caesars by Suetonius. As you know, I'm a sucker for Roman history, and there are basically three main primary sources for the Julio-Claudian dynasty and the Flavian dynasty. Suetonius is probably the most interesting of them because he gives the most memorable anecdotes about their private lives. It's arguable how much of it is always true, but how do we really know if it is or it isn't? He said it was, and he was alive back then, we weren't. So it's pretty sensational, but it remains an invaluable source for understanding early imperial Rome. My next fiction novel is another big one, The Count of Monte Cristo. This is the second long book that I'll admit, after reading the whole thing, there was a little detail at the end that I didn't exactly love, but holy crap, is the rest of this great. From the moment Edmond Dantes is the main character, from the moment he's arrested to the moment he escapes the dungeon and finds his treasure, the pages just absolutely fly by. Honestly, it's like you're not even reading, you're just absorbing it. Then it slows down a little in the middle, but you learn down by the end that each of those threads that they were building in the middle were necessary for the most traumatic revenge tale ever. He doesn't just sword fight the three men who put him there. He completely and systematically destroys their lives. He even doubts at the end the moral pureness of his revenge. I like that. He believes himself through most of this book to be the instrument of God's judgment. But then at the very end, he realizes that he may have gone too far. And that kind of nuance is something that pretty much every other revenge tale lacks. So I don't know. I really like this. Maybe not that one little detail at the end, but everything else, it's a great book. It's well worth the read, even though it's a big guy. To make sure that this might be probably the most different book recommendation you ever watch, not only have I included fiction and nonfiction and primary sources, but my next nonfiction novel is a baseball book called The Bad Guys Won. It's by Jeff Pearlman. It's about the colorful and controversial 1986 New York Mets. He explores the players' off-field antics alongside their championship season. But on a personal level, this book has your grandfather in it. Randy Neiman, he was a member of this team, and he's interviewed quite a bit in this book. Jeff Pearlman does a good job incorporating him in there. So it's really interesting to read, especially for us. But that's just something I think is really cool. Bad Guys Won by Jeff Pearlman. The next primary source is another landmark book. I do love these illustrations and maps in these books. But this is Herodotus. Herodotus is the go-to primary source for the Greco-Persian Wars. He also makes sure to document the cultures, customs, and traditions of numerous ancient societies. He's often called the father of history because his approach, he was really the first to combine storytelling with historical inquiry. And again, I can't say enough about these landmark versions of the primary sources. They're fantastic. And Herodotus, the history is something else, man. Read it. This next fiction one, man, one of my favorites, Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. This was the first Hemingway novel I ever read, and it remains my favorite. Man, the first few pages just absolutely blew my mind. It was the first time I had ever read prose like that. It was phenomenal, man. The way he writes is just something else. He uses that prose to portray love and loss and emphasize the unpredictability of life and the devastating consequences of conflict. And man, holy cow, the ending of this book is devastating. It's like rip your heart out stuff. Just wow. I read other Hemingway books after that, and I liked them to varying degrees, but nothing ever really grabbed me and devastated me at the end quite like A Farewell to Arms. This is quintessential Hemingway, and it's fantastic. You should read it. The next nonfiction I've got is called The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman. This was another Pulitzer Prize winner. It's about the first month of World War I. It's actually super interesting because it shows how Europe's leaders kind of unintentionally transformed what would have been a regional crisis into a massive global war through this series of misunderstandings and ego moves. It's still one of the most influential histories of the 20th century. Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman. All right, we did Suetonius. So when you're talking about the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the other main source outside of Cassius Dio is Tacitus. This is this is the complete works, but the Annals is specifically what I was talking about reading, but actually read all the Tacitus. It's all good stuff. So this is the second book on the list about Imperial Rome, as I mentioned. It tells a story of the reigns of Tiberius through Nero. He offers a sharp commentary on corruption, ambition, and the abuse of power. Because he's thought of Tacitus as less deliberately sensational than Suetonius, his work is one of the most important sources for really understanding early Imperial Rome. Though I will say, having read both of them, he has his own biases and he repeats many of the same stories, but he's always thought of as the more serious of the two historians. Fiction, now we're talking. The Brothers Karamazov. This is the second Dostoevsky book on the list. And even though it's less of a direct kind of narrative like story than Crime and Punishment is, this one's my favorite. It's far more philosophical, and it centers on three brothers whose conflicting beliefs create tension within their family. More specifically for the story, their father's murdered, and the investigation forces each character to confront questions of morality and responsibility. But it also includes one of the greatest Christian thought experiments in literature. Fantastic. Seriously, don't die without reading this book. Dostoevsky, the Brothers Karamazov. It's fantastic. For my next nonfiction, I'm going a little off the board. Marley and Me. Sometimes a book just hits you at the right time of life or the right frame of mind. This memoir by John Grogan, he's a journalist. He uses funny stories about his family dog to tell a larger story about his young family coming into the world. I happened to read this when me and your mom had just moved in together and we had a puppy. But you know what? Still, there are many stories and lessons in this book that I still think about all the time. This is a really good book, Marley and Me. Okay, for my next primary source, I'm going with Eusebius's Ecclesiastical History. Eusebius is a crucial primary source for early Christian history emerging from the hostile Roman Empire, which suddenly became very favorable to it during his lifetime because he lived during Constantine. This documents the origins and early development of Christianity. He records the lives of church leaders and the spread of Christian communities throughout the Roman Empire. He also details periods of persecution and major theological controversies. This remains one of the most important sources for early Christian history. Eusebius, Ecclesiastical History. Read it. All right, wrapping it up. For my last fiction novel, going with Moby Dick. I knew this book was a classic when I started reading it, but it really took me by surprise when the first few chapters were about this chill guy named Ishmael who was terrified to find out he was stuck in a hotel room with a tattooed islander from a cannibal tribe. But it turned out the cannibal guy was actually kind of cool and Ishmael was real cool, so they actually became really good friends. And the first few chapters is just kind of detailing their friendship. Very, very cool. It's a good way to draw you in. After that, though, Ishmael and his friend, they join a whaling ship, and they meet Captain Ahab. He's obsessed with the pursuit of this white whale that took his leg. This book combines adventure, philosophy, detailed, possibly too detailed, discussions of whaling. You have to have the kind of personality. I actually like to learn all about new things, so it didn't really bother me to get encyclopedia definitions of certain whaling things. I actually kind of liked it. I learned a lot. But I know that part's a little tough for people. But as far as Ishmael as a character, and as far as Ahab and his madness chasing the mighty white whale, this book is a classic for a reason. It's fantastic, and you should read it, Moby Dick. All right, for my last nonfiction, I'm going with The Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. Hear me out. You remember when Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am"? Well, by the time Kant wrote A Critique of Pure Reason, a school of philosophy called empiricism had pushed the idea that no knowledge could truly be acquired outside of analyzing sensory data, to the point where a philosopher named Hume actually doubted that there was even a self. So in A Critique of Pure Reason, Kant argues that there is reasonable knowledge that is a priori knowledge, which he just means like you know it before you learn it, you sort of know it instinctively. And that judgments can actually be made with a priori knowledge. Things that people know innately, like basic relationships between cause and effect, things that we would just know. A lot is made of the fact that this book is pretentious and the language is difficult and it's long and all of that is a given. But I really do think it's worth sitting down and just watching one of the greatest minds who ever lived build an entire philosophical system to the point of universally understood morality with one of the most minute starting points imaginable, a priori knowledge. It really is. It's worth doing it if you can get through it, man. Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. So my last primary source is going to be Josephus, The Complete Works. Or if you want to just read the Jewish War, read that. That's really good. Josephus himself has a super interesting story. He was the leader of a group of Jewish militants in a revolt against the Roman Empire. a general named Vespasian took siege on his fortress, and basically everyone in there with him committed suicide. But Josephus had a better idea. He asked to speak with Vespasian, and he told him that he was a prophet and that he had a prophecy for him that one day he would be emperor. Long story short, through a chain of events, including Nero's suicide, Vespasian does become emperor. And when that happens, Josephus goes from a prisoner to live in a pretty sweet life in Rome, writing at length about the Jewish histories. So this gives us the best first-person account we have of Judea under Roman rule in the first century during the revolt, which destroyed the temple in 70 CE. Josephus, the Jewish War, or the complete history is fantastic. And that's it for my book recommendations. I have a bunch of runners-up. The thing I do, though, is when I really like books, I lend them to people. And so I chose books that I still have here to show in the camera. But there's lots of other great books. There's even other great books written by these same people. But check these out, and I'll see you later.